Calling to order the regular board meeting of November 3rd, 2022. The time is now 4:09 p.m. Please call the roll.
President Herrera,
Here.
Vice President Chavez. Here. Clerk Cortese. Here. Member Lay. Here. Member Doe.
Here.
All here. Again, welcome to this board meeting. Are there any members of the public who would like to provide public comment to the board on a closed session agenda item at this time?
We have no online public comment, nor do we have any in
Being
person.
none online and none in the chambers, the board will then recess to closed session. Calling to order a special board meeting for November 3rd, 2022. The time is now 6:04 p.m. Before I ask that the roll be called, I want to explain to the audience that in order to take action on a matter that came to our attention fairly late, we are convening a special meeting to act on that, which requires 24 hours notice, which we posted. We will act on that and close that meeting, and then I will convene the regular meeting, which had previously also been publicized and agendized and so on. So again, this is the special board meeting of November 3rd, 2022. The time is now 6:04, 6:05 p.m. Please call the roll.
President Herrera,
Here.
Vice President Chavez. Here. Clerk Cortese. Member Lay. Here. Member Doe.
Here.
All members present, and moving straight to the, well, section 301 is simply an opportunity to request any change in the published agenda, but we're going to simply proceed to section 4.01, discussion and or action to waive second reading requirement. I heard something. To waive second reading requirement of board bylaw 9310 and adopt proposed draft amendments to board policy 5141.21 regarding administering medication and monitoring health conditions. Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, if I could please enable the screen sharing for me, please. Yes, this comes to you as a first reading and a waiving of the second reading in order to make changes to this board policy 5141 2.1, as well as the administrative regulation 5141.21. These board policies and administrative regulations are response to the presence of fentanyl in our communities. Fentanyl in 2012, 82 Californians lost their lives to that drug. In 2021, that number rose to 6,000 Californians that lost their lives to this drug. We also know that 80% of student age deaths by way of drugs, 80% of those are attributed to fentanyl. There is the ability for us as a community to work together to limit its use, but we also know that there are times where students have ingested fentanyl and suffer the response, and in a situation resulting in death many times, but through overdose. There is a response that is called naloxone hydrochloride. What that does is it combats the effect of the opioid on the body, and then naloxone reopens the airways and allows a student or any Californian to be revived in that manner. We actually had this naloxone used last week in one of our schools. Eastside currently is one of the few districts that has this material present and this response presence in its school, and it's there to save lives. In order for us to continue with this and for us to receive training and to train more staff, board policies need to be in place. We want to train people as quickly as possible. Therefore, Ed Services and the team is bringing this forward tonight for a first reading, waiving the second reading, and to adopt these policies and ARs.
Okay, are there any public comments on this? None. No one in the room for public comment? Okay, so members of the board, comments or questions or a motion?
Moved and seconded.
Okay, moved by Doe and seconded by Cortese. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Oops, sorry, our student governing board
Aye.
representative, how do you vote?
Aye.
You vote aye. Members of the board, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
What is it? What's what's the nay vote? Oh, whatever, it's unanimous. Suddenly the gray matter. So that takes care of item 4.01, and I am now adjourning and ending the special meeting. And moving now to formally convene the special board meeting of, the regular board meeting of November 3rd. Board, although I don't see it published, we're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we do not have any board recognition under item 6, and we're moving to section 7, student board liaison, and we have with us here Lee Henning, who is our student governing board representative, and you now have time to speak.
Okay, so during the last meeting, I mentioned the student input poll that we had yet to send out. And we've sent it out and we received a little over 100 responses so far. Currently, over a third of the responses are pertaining to the restroom quality and quantity at the school. And so we would like to work with Mr. Vanderzee to address that issue so that students will have maintained bathrooms and feel safe while using the restroom. Other issues include safety, centering around mental health and bullying. And those were the two largest ones so far. And that's all the updates that I have.
That concludes your remarks. Thank you. And I neglected to give the usual information for members of the public. So members of the public, please submit your public comment as follows. You may raise your virtual hand in Zoom to request to speak and offer comment in real time. In-person public commentators will be allowed entry, 3 speakers at a time in the boardroom. Upon conclusion of a speaker's public comment on the agenda item, the speaker must exit the boardroom. You may also submit your public comment online by accessing the link to the form on the district's homepage, ESUHSD.org, or the link on the agenda. Please reference the agenda item number in your written comment and limit your written comments to no more than 1,000 characters in length. Public comments submitted online will be read into the record. Please note that all meetings are recorded. All regular and special meetings of the Board of Trustees and board study sessions are streamed live on meeting nights and are also available for viewing the day after the meeting by accessing the district's YouTube channel listed on the district's webpage at esu.org under the Quick Links section. The board is not able to respond to items that are not on the agenda or any personnel issues. Your comment will be read into the record and will be directed to the superintendent and or the appropriate staff member for response. Interpretation of this meeting in Spanish and Vietnamese can be heard by accessing the link and following the instructions shown on the agenda or the district's website. And I neglected to give the board an opportunity under section 5 for any request on the for items to be changed or removed on the published agenda. Is there any such request?
The administration is requesting removal of item 11.01.
Removal of 11.01. Let me just, and that's action regarding update on the novel coronavirus. When we get to 11.01, we're going to skip that. To make a note. Okay, if there's nothing else, we're going to proceed.
Also requesting to move.
Could you speak into the microphone more?
Patty, do you know what number it is?
It's 8.03.
Requesting to move number 8.03 to the next meeting.
Okay, so request from our student governing board representative to remove item 8.03 for second reading of proposed draft amendments to the student governing board bylaws. So,
And the request would be to bring that back on the November 17th meeting.
okay, we're bringing that item back, but it's not on tonight's agenda. Any others? Okay, we're going to proceed. Now we're actually in section 8 and 8.01. Any items that to be considered dismissed or acted out of order? There's only one. So I'm going to proceed to item 8.02 to approve the Metropolitan Education District amended and restated ground lease with McDonald's Corporation. Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, this come to us due to the fact that we are part of a joint powers authority with the Metropolitan Education District, otherwise known as Metro Ed. There are 4 parcels. We are one of 6 districts within that joint power authority or JPA. And with that comes the knowledge that there are 4 properties that have tenants on that land adjacent to Metro Ed. And we are in we have lease agreements with those entities. What's coming for you tonight is a new lease agreement with one of those partners, which is McDonald's. We are asking in order to ratify this document, this lease agreement is going to all of those districts of which we are one. We are asking that you approve the agreement and we will then sign as such and deliver that information to the JPA. The proceeds from this lease agreement go into the program at Metro Ed.
I'll move to approve.
Moved by Cortese, seconded by Doe. Student board member, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, all members of the board, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it passes unanimously. So we are now at section 9, public hearing, no items, okay, and so that's moving on to section 10. Public members who wish to address the board, do we have any requests? Okay, Mary Gillen says no requests there. Mr. Superintendent, none that you're aware of?
Or no request to speak.
Okay, and I see none in the room, so we're going to move on from section 10 to section 11. And we've dropped 11.01 and we're now at item 11.02, second reading of Senior Manager of Internal Audit Proposal Annual Audit Work Plan. Members of the board, comments, questions?
This
Kwong,
is a second reading, right?
would like to make any comments? Ms. Kelly Kwong, Senior Manager. State your name for the record.
Good evening, Kelly Kwong, Senior Manager of Intro Audit. This is the second reading of the annual audit work plan. It was brought to the board on the first reading September 15th and then discussed at the audit committee on October 11th.
No, the plan is very comprehensive of all the work that Kelly has led in the district and continues to lead. And we are very much looking forward to continuing to work with her under this plan. This is to approve, yep.
Aye.
Aye.
There it is. It's on now. Good evening, members of the board, Board President Herrera and Superintendent Banerjee. I'm Miriam Adelat, Director of Student Services.
Could you say your name a little more slowly? I want to get it right.
Miriam Adelat. And tonight I will be reviewing the reentry process when students are returning from an expulsion. Here at Eastside, we're trying to build equitable communities where we welcome all students as they are, and I'll be speaking more to how this takes how in action, I guess you could say, when students are returning from expulsions, and how we focus on their strengths and areas of growth, and we support them in that areas of growth, and that we as adults positively respond to their social, emotional wellness and academic needs. And so through the reentry process, you're going to see how we really focus on all these aspects and that we engage them with tasks that develop their strategic thinking. We use a systems response where we ensure that we have policies in place, which we do for our students coming from reentries. And we want to make sure that students can access and receive instruction. So we try to remove barriers as much as we can, and you'll hear more about that. And then ultimately, we as adults want to have practices in place to support our students upon returning from expulsions. We use a MTSS model where we look at the whole child. We're not just focusing on their behavior, but their wellness and instruction as well. And so looking at the data from the past few years, in 2018-19, we had 16 expulsions. In 19-20, we had 10 expulsions. 21-22, so last year we had 21 expulsions. And then this year, at the time when I submitted this report, we had 1 expulsion, but tonight we had our second one approved. So we have had 2 expulsions so far.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So 2020 to 2021 is not up there, and I assume that's because we had 0 expulsions because
Correct.
we had 0 school.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And the 19-20 is only up until March, right?
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm going to focus a little bit on last year. So from the 21 expulsions, We had 2 expulsions that came through for possession, sales, or furnishing a firearm. We had 6 for students who caused physical injury, 1 for committed assault or battery on a school employee, 12 used force or violence, and then that makes a total of 21. And I just want to name that majority of these will require, it's a little bit more complicated than just having caused physical injury. So just causing physical injury in and of itself won't necessarily be an expulsion. It's not necessarily. So I just wanted to name that. Looking at the demographics of our students who were expelled last year, we had 1 Asian student, 2 African-American, we had 13 Hispanic students. We had 2 students of multiple races. We had 2 Native American or Pacific Islander, I'm sorry, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, and then we had 1 white student that was expelled. I just want to kind of bring your attention that 90% of the students who were expelled were socioeconomically disadvantaged. So 20 out of the 21 students. And 33% of the students expelled were students with disabilities. And if we look at the expulsions by grade level, we'll see that majority of our expulsions came from our freshmen and sophomores. And so I just highlighted, or I brought in, part of our district's obligation is that a student's race, cultural background, disability, gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status, or language proficiency will not predict success or failure. That's really our goal. But it's the system's response that influences the outcomes. And so that's something we're really trying to focus on is our response.
And if I could comment, was pointed out to me, and I do agree that the system is bigger than the school district,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
The system includes our neighborhoods and our families and our businesses and, so I just wanted to name that,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And-
So,
Can we go back to the number 7, to the numbers? Also, something to point out is that the majority there are Hispanics, are Latino students, right? And so when we talk about disproportionality, that is disproportionality. And so what I want, and I know we're gonna talk about this ongoing, but like, I think that's worth noting, right? How are we supporting our students, especially when we have a group that's drastically over, getting the most expulsions than other students?
Thank you. Yes. And so when a school submits an SDR, a student discipline review, there's 3 potential outcomes that they can request. So they can either request an expulsion, request an involuntary transfer, which would only be for juniors and seniors, or they can request district support. So when they submit this packet, they can check either one of those. And if they're going to submit it for an expulsion or involuntary transfer, there has to be documentation to show that it's an expellable offense. Or the behaviors, there's multiple behaviors that led to the reason for an expulsion. And then should an expulsion, the possible expulsion recommendations that can come out of an expulsion, right? So it could be either a stipulated agreement to an expulsion, a full expulsion, a suspended expulsion, or no expulsion. So I just wanted to put that out there that there's a whole process that this goes through. And so when we actually look at the numbers that come out of does an expulsion take place or not, there's all these other things that can potentially happen between the time SDR is submitted and to the time that there's an outcome when it goes to a panel. Yes.
this is a tangent, but when I got on the board, I was so lost in all of the school, what did I call it? Like all the acronyms, and it's like
Yeah.
education is a second language,
Yeah.
So if it's possible going forward, doing something like this, because the community accesses these presentations too, we
Absolutely.
just put out, school, because I didn't actually even know what that meant. I mean, I knew you'd tell us, but put school, what is it? School?
Student discipline
Oh,
review.
student. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So once, a student is recommended for an expulsion and they go through expulsion hearing, then the hearing panel can, recommend, there's certain terms that they could come up with. So it could be up to 2 semesters that a student is recommended for an expulsion, for up to 1 calendar year for any of the 489615C violations, so a firearm, brandishing a knife, selling a controlled substance, sexual assault, battery, or explosive. So those are the only violations that can be up to 1 calendar year. Otherwise, it's up to 2 semesters. And then the possible placement outcomes can be that the panel recommends that the student return back to their home school, that there's another comprehensive school within the district that the student should attend, an alternative school within the district, or a community day school. So those are options that the hearing panel decides they recommend. And then from the expulsion term also outlines that the student needs to remain in good academic standing, that they attend classes, that there are no major behavioral incidents, that they receive counseling services, and they could potentially recommend for the parents to participate in some services and possibly community service hours as well. So those are all really options leaving it up to the hearing panel. I want to say almost every single panel does recommend counseling and, expecting good academic standing and attending classes and things like that.
Which is consistent with our MTSS, right?
Absolutely, yes. And so if the panel recommends for a full expulsion, the student would get placed at Sunol Community Day School. So we have a partnership with the County Office of Education where they oversee Sunol Community Day School, and then our student would automatically go there. If they recommend for a suspended expulsion, or if there's a stipulated agreement to an expulsion, then for juniors and seniors, usually they're placed at an alternative school, which we take many things into consideration when placing them. So like transportation, supports, possible conflicts with other students or community members, school culture, number of prior placements. There's a lot of different things that we take into consideration when placing students. And for a freshman and sophomore, they will usually get placed at a comprehensive school where we also take into things there's a lot of things taken into consideration, including students with IEPs. So I work really closely with our special services department to make sure that we find appropriate placement for our students. And there are times where Sunol or ISP, Sunol Community Day School, or Independent Studies program is utilized as well for placement. So sometimes the parent or the student will say, I actually prefer, during the hearing, the student or the family may request for the student to be on independent studies, or they prefer that their student be placed on Sunol. So the family will make a recommendation at the end of that hearing, and then the panel takes that recommendation, really, takes it into consideration. So when our current readmission process is when students before they return, so before they complete their expulsion term, so it's usually up to 2 semesters. So before their second semester is done, I have a meeting with them and their caregiver here at the district office. And we had tons of them, many of them over the summer. And so I tell the student, bring whoever your advocate is or your support is, because really we want them to continue to have those supports in place when we place them if we return them back to their home school, or we place them somewhere else. We review the rehabilitation plan to see what parts they completed, and if they didn't, what was the barrier, what's going on, can they complete it over the summer? And we do a really deep dive. So when we talk about developing students' critical thinking skills, right? So engaging them in these conversations, I try to have these conversations mostly with the student. I ask the parent kindly if myself and the student can have like a deep conversation before the parent chimes in, because there's a lot of times where parents may want something or caregivers may want something, but I want to hear from the student where they're at, how they're feeling, where their areas of growth are, where their challenges are. And the goal is that, within that year, they've had an opportunity to really develop and think about their skills and their challenges and focus on them. So usually after an expulsion takes place, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, when we place them at any school setting, there's a lot of conversations about what support they need. to be successful, to remain at that school setting. And then I don't just think about the school day, but I think about after hours too. So we really use our community partners to do pro-social activities with them on the weekends or after school, or provide tutoring or mentoring for them, because we know that the students, a lot of it may be stemming from community issues that they bring it onto the school campus, but not necessarily always. And so we look at what supports they need, what are some of the areas of concern. We develop a support plan. So I never create a plan for the student. I create it with the student and the parent. And then we make a determination if the student should remain at their current school or return to their home school. So for example, I had a student who was placed at a school site through a suspended expulsion and was doing really, really well. And so when we considered moving him back to his home school this year, he asked to stay at his new placement. And he said he does really well at a small setting. He's built really good relationships. So we decided to keep him there. So those are the type of conversations that happen when we consider placing a student or returning them back. And then regardless of whatever the decision, the outcome comes from that, a support plan will be provided to the school. So a support plan is created, and then that will be provided to the school. So if they stay at the school that they're currently at, I'll just send a summary of what the conversation was and what the support plan is. And if the decision is to return them back to their home school, then once again, a summary is sent and then the support plan is provided. Yes.
All right, to be hogging the mic. First, I have to laugh at my request to not include acronyms, and then the next words out of my mouth were MTSS.
That was pretty great.
Multi-tiered systems of support. Okay, thank you. So one clarifying question. So when you say we return them to their home school, does it mean actually they go back to their original comprehensive school even after an expulsion? Is that a new?
No, so
I
after.
thought we didn't used to do that. I'm not opposing to it. I just thought we didn't used to do that.
Yeah, so if they've completed their expulsion term, right, they have the right to go back. So according to Ed Code, that's their right to go back to their home school. Yeah.
Great. So my next question then is actually even more significant. There is, so the reentry meeting at the site with the APA. So what you just said sounded like you just sort of sent a summary of the meeting, but is there actually a meeting that happens
Yes.
on site with the administrators and the
Yes.
students, teachers, or maybe you didn't get to that?
So not with the students, teachers, the APA, maybe an advisor, a social worker, they'll be present for a reentry meeting to welcome the student back, right?
Right.
And determine what supports they need. So if the recommendation is for counseling services, so that the social worker can just greet them, welcome them, introduce them, and walk them over to the wellness center. Just that warm handoff, right? So we don't want them just to go to school and just not have that connection. If a student is a foster youth, McKinney-Vento, or justice engaged, then one of our transition specialists from here will be at the site to welcome them. So that relationship is a continuum, right? It stays continuous for them from the time they are expelled all the way through till they get replaced back into their school or homeschool.
Right. So is it your, because you're in contact yourself with a lot of these students, right?
I am in contact from the time that they're recommended for an expulsion to the time that they're expelled. So that's usually a good month, I want to say. And then when we consider, placing them, and then I usually have staff support to check up on their attendance, behavior, and grades and things like that. And then sometimes I've met with a family now for the third time on a reentry, right? I stay in touch. So if it's a high need student or who's struggling academically, then I'll be the one staying in contact with them. So it really depends.
So I guess my question is, from their perspective, would you say that the feedback that you've gotten from them, do they feel like they're really getting a fresh start? Or do they feel like their past is getting dragged with them?
I think I always try to tell them when they come up for an expulsion, I tell them that this is a moment in time. This is not something that defines them. And the goal is that they're reflective about their behavior and what could they have done different. Majority of them, I could say, during that conversation when I have with them before even the expulsion hearing happens, that they have come to a point where they realize like, I shouldn't have done that. And so they're able to name that. And which is really helpful to hear from the students and what could you have done differently? Who are some caring adults that you could trust on campus and off campus that you could talk to when you're struggling? So I always want them to be thinking about those things. And also I tell families like, part of your job is to support them through this process, right? And not necessarily judge them. I know as parents, we can sometimes be hard, but to really help them grow on some of the areas that they're struggling with. And so sometimes that's getting counseling, like for the parent as well, providing, making a referral for counseling services through, if a student is justice engaged, many times they get RAP services. So the student and the family will get services. And so we try to continue with some of those supports. Some of the students who come from an expulsion have completed their term are scared. They're like, I'm scared to mess up again. I'm scared to be in a large environment. So we have those conversations and say, okay, well, if you're not ready, that's okay. Like you've completed your term. If you're doing well, it looks like you're doing well, you could stay. And so a lot of times students prefer to stay. But I've had students who've also wanted to return back to their home school. So those conversations happen. The majority of them are 15, 16. In a couple of years, they're going to be adults. So I'd rather have that conversation and have these meaningful opportunities for them to learn from their behavior now.
Yep.
As a teaching opportunity so that this, I always tell them the streets aren't really kind and the outcomes can be so different. So let's talk about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And in the work that I did with young people before I joined the board, we used to talk about surrounding kids with a community of caring adults so that we could switch out to catch you to out to catch you. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I normalize like changing behavior is challenging. I give them examples like when I'm trying to eat healthy, if I surround myself around friends who are always eating junk food, who are always having soda, then I'm going to struggle. So just normalizing that behavior change is difficult. You have to surround yourself around positive people. So who are your friends that's impacting you? And so I do some of those activities with them to talk to them like, is this a positive person in your life or a negative person? Because it's either or, right? It's either they're influencing you in a positive way, or are they encouraging you to go to class? Are they encouraging you to, do positive things, or are they actually dragging you down?
Yep.
So, yeah.
And it sounds like we're also working with them to create some goals or some vision for what they want their life to be about, right?
Yeah. So after they complete their expulsion term, that's when we start thinking about, connecting them to the resources of the school site to talk about future planning. Some of the schools automatically have that embedded and some schools don't necessarily. At the larger schools, we try to find intentional ways that the students get connected with either clubs or other activities so that they could start thinking about future career college goals.
Outstanding. Thank you.
So should I not recommend a student to be readmitted to school, for the expulsion term to be completed and be readmitted? Then the student may appeal the denial to the school board. And then you all will review all written materials related to the denial of why there was no readmission, and then you shall readmit the student. If you make a finding that they have not met the conditions or that you feel that there are safety concerns, then you could choose to not readmit the student as well. And then the board's decision is really the final decision.
Do you find that most students do honor all the conditions?
I do. And then if they're not ready, meaning they're still behind on credits, right? I won't necessarily recommend for them to go back to a large comprehensive because they're behind on credits and that may not be in their best interest. Or if I know that there's potential conflicts with other students that can, so I may ask like, would you prefer to stay at this school? It looks like you're successful. How would you feel if there are some kids that you had conflict with and that were at the larger school, at your home school? And so I have those conversations to get a feel. So I may say that your expulsion term, you've completed your expulsion term, but my recommendation is for you to stay at your current placement. Yeah.
Why would the appeal process go straight from your position to the board? What happens to the superintendent as a route of appeal.
Yeah, because I'm the superintendent's designee, it goes straight to the board.
Still doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah, it's actually outlined in Ed code that because only the board, what we recommend to you is the expulsion. You as a board take that action. And so the appeal for readmission comes directly to the board.
Well, I
as
know
per
everything ultimately
Ed
comes
code.
to the board, but if it were reviewed by a superintendent when it's first been reviewed by Director of Student Services, that's an area where it can be reversed administratively. And why wouldn't that be in the process?
Yeah, this is dictated by Ed code. The
Ed code
readmission,
says
the
board
appeal.
is the one with the ultimate
Mhm.
action. But if the superintendent were to review it and withdraw a recommendation for to contradict a recommended, not recommendation of readmission, the board would not need to act.
Yeah, and we could look at adding that to the process. Currently, our board policies, as they read, this is the process for appealing a denial of
Yeah, I'm just saying
admission.
because we're talking about the board reviewing written materials, becoming familiar enough
Totally get it. Yep.
and
understand.
so on. I understand that if the decision is for a not readmit, the board has to be in the process. But if that decision administrative is reversed, the board does not need to be in the process, I'm imagining. And the superintendent could review those materials and reverse it on appeal. I understand our policies don't have it that way.
Yep.
I just find it strange.
Yeah,
that
and we
it
could
goes straight
definitely
from
review
the
that.
Mid-manager to the board.
Yep, we can review that and bring it back to the board.
And the last slide is really around us trying to align with the California Department of Education. And so, as I mentioned earlier, with the little lavender box, a student's race, cultural background, disability, gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status, or language proficiency will not predict success or failure. It's the system's response that influences the outcome. And so I'm just reiterating this and that our alignment as a district to the CDE. So I pulled out some key bullet points from the CDE website where it talks about where there's a focus on other means of corrective action or correction rather than a suspension or expulsion to bring about proper conduct and to use the MTSS model. And using an MTSS model, the request is that we provide training or supports around restorative justices, trauma-informed practices, social emotional learning, school-wide positive behavior interventions, and it goes on to explain a little bit more. And so I do want to say that there is a focus around that. We have been, through Ed Services, there's a focus on positive and safe school climates this year. And so that looks through, there's a variety of different ways that we're providing that. In addition to that, there's restorative practices training to staff that's being rolled out. So there's a lot of work that's being around provided around the MTSS and focusing on other means of correction. And then the 48900.5, it says at the very minimum, students who are threatened with removal from school, depriving them of their fundamental right to a publicly financed education are entitled to notice of the grounds for the removal and opportunity to be heard. So suspensions shall be imposed only when other means of correction fail to bring around about proper conduct. So there is a focus on using other means of correction where we have family conferences, we do mediations and other things to try to support the students so that they don't engage in behaviors that are causing disruption to school. Okay. And that's all I have. Are there any other questions?
Members of the board, other questions or comments? Student board representative? We appreciate
I do
your.
have some questions
do.
and thoughts.
Go
I
ahead.
do. Lee, did you? No? Okay. What I heard here in this presentation is that there is a re-entry meeting with people from staff, from the school staff, right? A few key people, but what I didn't hear is like, what is the engagement throughout that expulsion? Was that sorry if I
Yeah.
missed that?
That's okay. Yeah. So during the expulsion term,
Yes.
right? So when we place the student at a school site, there's a rehabilitation plan that's
Yes.
provided. And in there, there's embedded supports, right? And then there's always a referral to a community-based organization
Yes.
to provide support throughout the year, potentially up to 2 semesters, while the student is on their expulsion term.
But that's things that we say that they're going to do, but do we as a district like check in and see how are they doing? Like, what is the progress to goal? Like, where would, instead of like waiting for the whole expulsion
Right.
period to come,
So-
and then it's like, oh, you didn't meet your units, or you didn't get your counseling, or you didn't do your community
Yeah.
service, right? Like, how
Yeah.
do we make sure that the students are thriving? What does that engagement look like on our end? And how do we make sure that people that are supposed to be a part of that process and the part of the plan are executing? And
Right.
if it's not working,
Right.
like, let's get,
Yeah.
yeah,
So the APA at the school site is the person that's receiving the student and providing the supports at the school site, right? So they're the
Oh.
ones who should be checking in on grades, academics, things like that. At the same time, our student services specialists are monitoring as well. So if I notice a student is really struggling with attendance and it looks like the school site has done their interventions, then I will reach out to the student and family to determine what's going on, how could I support, things like that. But really their supports are and should be embedded at the school site. And so while the student is required to do X, Y, and Z, they're also getting the supports that they need as far as like mental health and wellness counseling, connection with the APA advisors, making sure that there's a check-in to ensure that the student's on track and is successful.
okay, so there are regular check-ins. So when they come to us, there's no surprises as to why they landed where they landed.
Correct. I mean, that's the process that is established and there shouldn't be any surprises now.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. This is not a question. This is more like a thought and connecting the dots in my brain, and like like an ask to continue connecting the dots, right? I know that as a district, we are doing a lot to support disproportionalities in different ways. And I know that there are a lot of things at play that lead to certain results. And the data, like I mentioned, there is a subgroup that is very clearly experiencing expulsions more than others. And for me, it's not just about that subgroup and what it means for that subgroup, but for our greater community and the impact that it has on the peers, on everybody, right? And so as we continue to do the work, I think if we could connect the dots of how this specific thing that we're doing is, supporting, this group of students that are expelled. I really appreciate that, because again, I know that the district is leading the way in a lot of stuff, but just to help us process, so that we can say like, oh yeah, we saw this data and we know ongoing. I don't think we could be a broken record enough, if you will. Sorry, Teresa Marquez, I know this is your wheelhouse, but I think it's important to, continue reiterating so people understand how one thing has an impact on a lot of things, and we should be thinking about it ongoing that way, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. Absolutely. And I am a former social worker and I'm here because I really believe in the work and the fact that our district's vision and mission is so aligned with exactly that, right? So your question or your thought is so aligned with what I'm feeling, and that's exactly it. I can even, when I look at any number of referrals that come up, that's what makes me concerned, is what is my role and how can I change? Because it is a systems response. While there is a community where our students are coming from, right? But it's not always looking at it from necessarily looking at the community from a strengths based lens is important, right? I think our community is resilient, or I think our community is strong. And there are so many things that our community is doing in such positive ways that I think we need to tap into that a little bit more so that we could bring excellence out of students. And I think for us, I think the challenge is when students have had challenges K through 8, right? The trajectory to disrupt those experiences makes it a little bit more challenging versus a K-12, right? So we're receiving students with whatever experiences they had. Majority of the students, I asked them, when was the time when school became challenging for you? Majority of them will take me back to about 5th grade, 6th grade. Right now, there's students who I just had a meeting with a family just the other day. Student's a freshman and hasn't accessed instruction since 6th grade. And so he's not going to class because he does not know anything that's going on, right? And so naturally, when you're not going to class and there's other behaviors that can come about, you get caught up in other things. So I do believe in that. And I do feel that the distance learning and those year and a half that we were in distance learning has impacted the social skills development of kids. And so, and the ability to access instruction, right? So for us to do some prevention work is that, so when we're focusing on positive and safe school culture and climate, it's how do we create schools and classrooms where students feel welcome, they feel supported, regardless of what their learning or their experiences were last year, or the year before, right? How can we create a new culture for them where they feel welcomed?
Yep.
And so I think that's really the focus of the work that we're doing through Ed Services is the positive, safe and school culture and climate is only, if we're looking at school safety, that's only one aspect of it, but we're looking at it from instruction, right? From wellness, from all different lens. And so that means our classrooms have to welcome all students, our schools have to welcome kids. And so that means when a student is struggling, right? Or a student is late or whatever struggle it is, how do we connect with that kid? Because that's a student that needs us the most.
And clearly we've been doing something, right? Because look at our data, right? It's not like we're not responding.
Right.
When we look at the numbers,
Yeah.
we're headed in the direction that we want to head. So I think that speaks to the work that we've been doing. So I also want to make sure that that is acknowledged.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Yeah.
We have a request to speak. I'm going to call forward Veronica Guizar. Well, let me just have the, just step aside for a moment.
Hi, my name is Veronica Guizar. We'll start now. As I listened to the information, I had a few questions. One is, what is the percentage of the people that have been expelled that graduated on time? How many graduated on time due to their expulsion? And the other one was, okay, I did hear the comment about check who you hang out with, see what their values are. Perhaps those are not the people you should be hanging out with. I have a sister that definitely went a different route in life, and she ended up hanging out with gangsters and so forth. Throughout my life, I tried to help her stray her away from gangsters and get her to people I hung out with. Very difficult to do once they're already connected, and I understand why. So my question is, how are these students that perhaps are in the wrong group are helped to get out of that? Are they being provided with some kind of support system, groups that do have students that can help them make these friendships that are more positive and be able to bond with them? Or is it just a comment that's made, think about it, move forward? They can think about it, but if you're not providing those kind of examples and people that are willing to be their friends, then, you know, I don't know, it's not helpful. Just wondering if that has helped. Now, the other thing I had, if these students are being expelled, are they being checked for learning disabilities and developmental disabilities? I had a really hard time having my kids diagnosed with developmental disabilities with ADHD. If I hadn't, they probably would be one of those kids that are being expelled. But if that is a possibility. The other thing is, I do see that 2 people were expelled. My son just had an experience at the high school. He was being choked, and I did a police report. They're taking care of that, the police, but not the high school. They just said, if it happens again, let us know.
Okay.
Nothing happened to the
Thank you
student.
very much for your comments. If you can come back to the microphone. And we have a question or comment from a member.
Um, Thank you for the presentation. I think it's very comprehensive that we understand more about student services. How do we support, our student during the expulsion? My question for you is, how many students that Director of Student Services not recommend a readmission?
So last school year,
Yes.
I'd have to look at the data. I want to say there were no students that I recommended for no readmission, but the agreement came out of it where we agreed to stay at the current placement.
Okay. That's good. Sorry. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, or do you have any comments in response to the question?
I do. I think one of the questions that I heard was, what supports do we put in place besides letting them know like their behavior is inappropriate and they should choose better? The community-based organizations that we have partnerships with, they're from our community. Some of them are formerly gang impacted. They know our community really well. And so we connect them with a mentor from a community-based organization to support them throughout the year or longer. I believe one other question that I could remember, and I'm forgetting right now. I don't know.
But the parent can still reach out to your office for any further
Absolutely.
information.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Appreciate your report today. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
We do have one request to speak from the public online.
Go ahead.
Thomas Brittendall, you'll, once we open your mic, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. So there's a lot I want to say that I don't have time to say. Hopefully I'll get to a chance to meet with all of you to speak further on this issue. One thing that we teach our students in economics is that trade-offs are almost inevitable with any sort of choice that we make. And earlier in the meeting, the student board member spoke about problems that the students are prioritizing on campus, such as vaping and certain other things that spoke to campus culture, climate safety, etc. And it is my hope that the district takes those sorts of complaints with the seriousness that they seem to be taking the issue of students who have been expelled. And with that, I will yield the rest of my time, and I look forward to speaking with you further.
Thank you.
For that comment. Any other comments? Any other requests to speak? Okay, that concludes this item on the agenda. Thank you again for the presentation. Moving on to item 12.02 on the second reading of board policy for uniform complaint procedures. Associate Sue Marquez.
This is the second reading of the board policy specific to uniform complaint procedures.
Does that require an action today or?
Yes.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Cortese and seconded by Chavez. If there's no further discussion, student board representative, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, members of the board, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It passes unanimously. Moving on to item 13.01 on approving the charter school audit extension waiver.
Yes, the auditor that is currently administering the audit at ACE Charter School is requesting a extension to complete that audit due to essentially a bottleneck of audits within that firm, and they're extending or asking an extension for that audit to be made to February 15, 2023.
Right? There are no comments or questions? A motion is in order. Okay, moved by Chavez, seconded by Cortese. Let's,
Yep, by lay.
seconded by Lay. Student board member, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye, and members of the board all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes unanimously. On to item 14.01 on memorandum of understanding between CSEA, chapter 187, and the Eastside School District regarding educator effectiveness grant for classified employees.
Thank you. This was the MOU that I referenced at the previous board meeting where to really utilize our classified staff to fill some of the vacancies that we have in our certificate ranks. So
Just one quick question. There, and I don't know if we're even allowed to do this, but I know, certain of my family members and stuff received college grants from organizations and they were asked for a commitment. But it doesn't look like we are asking for that here, like, that they agree to stay for 2 years or something like that.
in a way, the MOU is set up so that it kind of asks that without asking that, because the distribution of the funds is over a 3-year period of time.
Oh,
And
got
they
it.
have to remain employed with us in that position for those 3 years to get the disbursement.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, calling forward Julio Pardo to speak on this issue. And as president of CSEA local chapter, Mr. Pardo has up to 5 minutes for his comments.
Good evening, Julio Pardo, President CSEA, Chapter 187. I didn't want to come up here 5 times on 5 different items, so I'll just speak about most of them right now. First of all, on 13.01, no comment. On 12.01, I have a question. When I graduated from high school and I went to college, I thought I was really prepared for it. But when I got there, I had culture shock. I wasn't ready. And when I was there, I did some things, I said some things that I thought were fine, but my peers at that college didn't think so. And so there were some issues I had at that college at that time. So I'm just wondering, some of these students that we have that get expelled or get proposed for expulsion, I know some of them are not native to our country. And I'm wondering how long they have been in our state, in our district. So I'm wondering if of the 21 students that were mentioned, how many of them, is there a possibility to check how many of them have been in our country less than 2 years? Because if they come from somewhere else, they may behave a certain way that is inappropriate to us, but is fine to them because that's how they grew up. And so I'm just wondering how it's possible to check on that to see how many of these students had that. So thank you for that. I'm here really to discuss 14.01. I just want to say, I hope the board approves this. I can say that from my own school at Andrew Hill, we had 2 classified employees last year. One became a teacher this year and is currently working at Andrew Hill, and one became a counselor this year and is currently working in Andrew Hill. So I feel that this is a way for the district to get people that want to be in our district and hopefully will stay in our district. They've been here, I know one of them was only here for a couple of years, but the other one's been here quite a while and obviously chose to stay in our district. So I'm hoping that the board approves this, that we can get more people. The one thing I'm glad is that this doesn't say paraeducators. It says any classified employee that is willing to become a teacher. I think it's a good way for us to start getting some teachers that hopefully will understand our students and our community and make an impact on them. Thank you.
For this item 14.01, we need a motion. Moved by Chavez and seconded by Lay, okay? Really? Well, actually, voices go simultaneously. I get confused. Okay, student board member, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye, and members of the board all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it passes unanimously. Item 15, section 15, there are no items. And we're now at the consent calendar, and I'm going to pull item 17.02 because there's a request to speak on that. Other than 17.02, a motion is in order for the consent calendar.
Move to approve the consent calendar, except for item 17.02.
Second.
Okay, moved by Cortese, seconded by Doe. Student board member, how do you vote?
Aye.
Votes aye, and members of the board all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes unanimously. Calling forward Mr. Julio Pardo on item 17.02, Career Technical Education Advisory Committee.
Okay, Julio Pardo again, is CH 187. And if your meeting goes past 8:30, you can blame me. The reason why I want to talk, I want to mention 1702 is I read through it. And I know you have a committee there. I saw who composes the committee. My question is, who are the parents and who are the students? Because according to what I read, there's supposed to be parents and students on this committee. And I see a lot of technical people. I see a lot of administrators and executives and such directors. But I don't see anyone who's a parent or a student. So I'd like to know who are the parents and who are the students of this committee. Thank you.
Good point. Good question. Thank you. Then a motion is in order for this item 17.02.
Just a quick question to the superintendent. What's the consideration for Mr. Pardo's point? Is that something we can just vote on now and then look into later?
Yes, I think we can amend this list if necessary.
Okay. I'll second.
Moved by Doe, seconded by Cortese, with the understanding that there will be further action on membership in response to Mr. Pardo's pointing out that there needs to be parent and student representation. So student board member, how do you vote?
Aye.
So aye, and members of the board, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes unanimously. And moving beyond the consent calendar to section 21, there are no written report recommendations. Moving to section 22. 22.01 is an opportunity for the board to request items on future agendas. Is there any such request? They're already carrying some items listed here. There, yeah, Member Lay.
I would like to request the presentation for relating to the wellness center, as well as the program has been supporting our student during the COVID-19. How would they impact with our wellness center, and how the student, have, implemented, the program from social worker, and how can we work together? So I'd like to have that presentation.
Thank you for that.
Okay, if there are no other requests, we're going to move on to section 23, comments by the trustees, superintendent, and so on. 23.01 Board of Trustees. I'll start to my far left with Member Doe.
I had a privilege of visiting Evergreen High School, and it's a pleasure. So, and I want to take the opportunity to thank Principal Kai Kleckner for welcoming in and also bringing me to the classroom. So, one of the first top class I went to was Evergreen. There was an AP economic class. And of course, one of the first topic we talked about was trade-off and opportunity costs and return on investment. So I want to take the opportunity to thank the teachers from the AP economic class, Tony DiVincenzi, and please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, along with a few other teachers, Virginia Yenter, Savin James, Trisha Gray from the Social Work and the Wellness Center, Winning Win, Anka. I also want to recognize one particular student for exercising his right to contact the board member and make a request. Please, again, forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Akshash Siri Nani. Thank you very much. And I look forward to visiting more schools across all our campus. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Lorena Chavez.
So, Feliz Dia de los Muertos to everybody out there. That is the Day of the Dead, celebrated in a lot of our Latin communities. I had the privilege of visiting Independence High School, where all of the Spanish classes did presentations, dances, and it was really beautiful to see. We talked about history. I saw multiple altares and ofrendas, and there was a beautiful big one at the front of C Commons where they put up pictures of previous staff from Independence that had passed on. So students got to, talk about teachers and staff from their community that had passed on. And I thought it was really cool to see students from different cultures embracing this celebration and talking about what it meant for them and people that they loved that have passed on. Because that is one of the beautiful things of Eastside, right? We are so diverse. So to celebrate each other and embrace each other, I think is one of our strengths. So it was really great to see all of our students be able to do that. So thank you, Independence, for hosting me earlier this week.
Thank you, Board Clerk Cortese.
Just that I continue to enjoy working with our student governing board, and we'll hear from our student rep Lee Henny soon. I don't have much else to say except an encouragement to anybody out there. Don't forget to vote and encourage your family and friends to vote. Ask, check, did you send in your ballot? Because you don't even need to leave your house anymore. You don't even need to have a postage stamp. So we have a robust community when everybody participates.
Member Lay.
I'd like to report that on October 26th, I attend the Santa Clara County Board Association for dinner with board colleagues Brian Doe. The interesting part beside music and dinner is the panelists for student wellness advisory group was led by Dr. Power, former director of Eastside Services, and among 5 students who were on the panelists, 2 of our students. Their name is Kaylee Dang from Evergreen and Misaki Nguyen from Silver Creek. I'm very proud of our student. That's why I want interest to listen about the Wellness Center and how this program has been supported. Listen from the panelists, listen to our student. It's really make me feel that the program is supported, and wonder to, what can we do to expand it and support it. And that's all I have, and good luck to me and my board colleagues, and get out to vote. And that's all I have.
Thank you. I think Board Clerk Cortese has another comment here.
Just something I failed to mention at the last board meeting, that I actually attended the California Association of Bond Oversight Committees. And that was really excellent. There were a lot of, best practices shared, and I had a conversation with Kelly Kwong to find out that we are in fact engaged in many of those. So, and there's some room for growth there, but I was affirming that that Eastside's got a very strong accountability program, accountability for our bonds, and was pleased to see a number of members of the CBOC there, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. Thank you.
Well, President, I just wonder, one thing is I wish our bond measure end will be successful, because that is something that has been,
Thank you. And I don't have any comment here, so I'm going to go to our student board representative, Lee Henny.
Earlier, my notes actually weren't loaded, and I failed to mention another response, which was about technology, and specifically about the AP exams being moved to an online format for May. In the past, College Board online exams have had issues, and many students have had issues with that. And I understand that the board can't really control that, but what they can control is making sure that all the students have adequate and equal technology. I would just like to emphasize that many students will need to switch out their current Chromebooks and may wait until April or May, and to just be aware of that need and to have that technology ready beforehand.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, it is November. It is November 3rd. And on November 30th is the last day for our seniors to apply to San Jose State and take advantage of the Spartan Eastside Promise. So if you haven't done so already, my good friends, now is the time. We have an excellent opportunity right next door to continue a full participant and towards full participation in Silicon Valley. If you're thinking about it, do it. College is very much a possibility for our students, and we have an excellent opportunity for our students to be accepted with the GPA requirements, the A through G requirements, and applying by November 30th. Thanks.
Thank you. Moving on, 23.04, item 23.04, board meeting evaluation. Any comments? Okay, one comment
Done
being
before
offered is
s-
that it's 7:19 PM. Okay. All right. I don't hear any other comments forthcoming. I'm going to move on to reporting from closed session 24.01 legal counsel.
Good evening. Closed session item 2.02. Motion by member Cortese, second by member Doe. The board unanimously approved the stipulated agreement in lieu of expulsion in case number 22-23-002. Closed session item 2.03. And a motion by member Doe, second by member Cortese. The board unanimously approved the superintendent's annual evaluation. There are no further actions to report.
Thank you. And that does bring us to the end of the meeting. And so I hereby adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for being here tonight.